World War II was a period of intense innovation, strange coincidences, and unexpected developments that still leave us in awe today. From secret missions to unusual alliances and peculiar tactics, there's much more to the war than the major battles and political maneuvers we often hear about. Let's dive even deeper into some of the most bizarre and curious events that shaped the outcome of the war, showcasing the ingenuity, desperation, and sometimes sheer luck that determined the fate of nations. To begin, one of the strangest military units to emerge from World War II was the 1st Special Service Force, also known as the Devil's Brigade. This elite commando unit was composed of American and Canadian soldiers who were trained in extreme conditions: rock climbing, parachuting, hand-to-hand combat, making them a formidable force in unconventional warfare. But their nickname, the Devil's Brigade, came from a note found on a dead German soldier, which referred to them as Black Devils. The unit painted their faces black for night operations and moved so silently that they were able to infiltrate enemy lines undetected. Their psychological impact on the enemy was profound, and they were feared by the Germans. The brigade's exploits in the mountains of Italy and the snowy fields of France became the stuff of legend. But few people today are aware of this incredible group of soldiers and their contributions to the war effort. Staying with the theme of psychological warfare, let's explore the curious role of animals in the conflict. While we've already mentioned carrier pigeons and sabotage rats, there was an even more bizarre plan involving bats. Yes, bats. The United States once developed a plan called Project X-Ray, which involved attaching tiny incendiary bombs to bats and releasing them over Japanese cities. The idea was that the bats would roost in buildings, and when the bombs detonated, they would start widespread fires. It sounds like a plot from a science fiction movie, but the plan was actually tested. During one trial, the bats accidentally set fire to a U.S. Army base. Though the project was ultimately scrapped in favor of the atomic bomb, it highlights the extreme lengths to which military planners were willing to go in their quest for victory. The idea of weaponized animals wasn't limited to bats either. There were also plans to train dolphins to carry explosives and target enemy ships. Although these ideas never fully materialized, they offer a fascinating glimpse into the unconventional thinking that emerged during this global conflict. Now, let's take a look at another unusual chapter in the war: the use of double agents. The most famous of these was one Pugil Garcia, known by the codename Garbo. He was a Spanish spy who played both sides, acting as a double agent for both the Nazis and the British. Remarkably, he was able to convince the Germans that he had built a vast network of informants across the UK, while in reality, his entire spy network was completely fabricated. His fake reports of him misled the Germans on numerous occasions, including convincing them that the D-Day landings would take place in Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. His work was so convincing that the Germans awarded him the Iron Cross, one of their highest military honors. At the same time, the British awarded him the MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, for his role in misleading the Nazis. Garbo's ability to manipulate both sides without being caught is one of the most remarkable feats of espionage in history, and his actions undoubtedly saved countless lives by diverting German forces away from key operations. We've touched on propaganda before, but let's delve deeper into one of the most curious aspects of wartime propaganda: the use of fashion. During the war, clothing materials like wool, silk, and leather were rationed, and governments encouraged citizens to make do and mend by repurposing old clothes or repairing damaged garments. However, Nazi Germany took it one step further. They introduced a type of propaganda known as victory fashion or National Socialist fashion. This was an attempt to promote the image of the ideal Aryan woman: strong, healthy, and dressed in a manner that reflected Nazi values. Women were encouraged to wear simple, functional clothing that symbolized their role in supporting the war effort and the Nazi state. At the same time, fashion in the Allied nations also took on a propaganda role. In Britain, the government introduced the utility clothing scheme, which provided affordable, high-quality clothes made with minimal fabric. Fashion became a tool for governments to promote solidarity, thrift, and national identity, with citizens encouraged to express their patriotism through their wardrobes. It's a reminder of how even the most mundane aspects of daily life were shaped by the war. But the strange curiosities of the war weren't confined to Europe. In Asia, we see another fascinating story with the Mongolian cavalry, who fought alongside Soviet forces. Yes, cavalry, horseback soldiers, were still used during World War II, despite the mechanization of warfare. The Mongolians, renowned for their horsemanship, joined the Soviets in their battles against Japan. Their cavalry units were particularly effective in the vast, open plains of Mongolia and Manchuria, where tanks and vehicles struggled to maneuver. Armed with rifles and sabers, the Mongolian cavalry rode into battle much like their ancestors had for centuries, evoking the image of Genghis Khan's armies. It's almost surreal to imagine soldiers on horseback charging into battle in a war dominated by planes, tanks, and machine guns. But their role in the war, while small, is a testament to the diversity of the forces involved in the global conflict. On the other side of the world, we find another curious story involving the United States and Mexico. During World War II, Mexico played a surprising role in the war effort by sending a squadron of fighter pilots to join the Allies. Known as the Aztec Eagles, this group of Mexican pilots fought alongside American forces in the Pacific Theater, flying combat missions against Japanese forces. Their contribution to the war is often overlooked, but it highlights the truly global nature of the conflict. Mexico's decision to join the war was partly influenced by the sinking of two of its oil tankers by German U-boats, which spurred the country to declare war on the Axis powers. The Aztec Eagles' participation in the war not only strengthened the ties between Mexico and the United States, but also demonstrated the willingness of nations from all over the world to unite against the Axis. Speaking of alliances, another lesser-known but fascinating chapter of the war is the story of Iran's involvement. At the beginning of the war, Iran was a neutral country, but it found itself in a precarious position due to its strategic location and oil reserves. In 1941, British and Soviet forces jointly invaded Iran to secure its oil fields and ensure a supply route to the Soviet Union. This occupation, known as the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran, forced the pro-German Shah to abdicate, and his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was installed as a more compliant ruler. The Allies used Iran as a key supply route, known as the Persian Corridor, through which they transported vast quantities of aid to the Soviet Union. This invasion and subsequent occupation of Iran had lasting implications, shaping the country's post-war political landscape and laying the groundwork for future tensions between Iran and the West. Let's now turn to an extraordinary example of bravery and survival. The story of the Soviet female snipers is one of the most remarkable and underappreciated tales of the war. These women, trained to become deadly sharpshooters, were deployed to the front lines to pick off enemy soldiers with terrifying accuracy. One of the most famous was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, known as Lady Death, who was credited with over 300 confirmed kills, making her one of the most successful snipers in history. Pavlichenko's skill and determination made her a symbol of Soviet resistance, and she became an international celebrity when she toured the United States to promote the war effort. These women defied the traditional gender roles of the time and proved that they could be just as effective and deadly as their male counterparts. Their stories are a testament to the role of women in the war, not just as factory workers or nurses, but as soldiers fighting on the front lines. Another curious story comes from the scientific front of the war, the race for nuclear power. While the Manhattan Project in the United States is well known for developing the atomic bomb, fewer people are aware of the role of a small Norwegian resistance group in preventing the Nazis from developing their own nuclear weapon. In 1943, the Nazis were attempting to produce heavy water, a key component for nuclear research, at a facility in Norway. A group of Norwegian commandos, trained by the British, launched a daring raid on the facility, sabotaging the production of heavy water and setting back the Nazi nuclear program. This mission, known as Operation Gunnerside, was one of the most successful sabotage missions of the war and prevented the Nazis from potentially gaining a devastating new weapon. The bravery and ingenuity of these commandos in the face of overwhelming odds is one of the great unsung stories of the war. and it played a crucial role in ensuring the Allies maintained their technological advantage. Lastly, let's not forget the strange and tragic story of the Phantom War between Japan and the Soviet Union. While most people associate World War II with the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan fighting against the Allies, there was a separate and largely forgotten conflict between Japan and the Soviet Union in the latter. The 1930s. This undeclared war, known as the Battles of Kok and Gol, took place on the border between Mongolia and Manchuria and involved fierce fighting between Soviet and Japanese forces. The Soviets, under the command of future war hero Georgy Zhukov, decisively defeated the Japanese in a series of battles, which ultimately led to a ceasefire. This conflict had significant consequences as Japan, having been humbled by the Soviet victory, turned its attention southward towards the Pacific, setting the stage for its confrontation with the United States. Meanwhile, the Soviets were able to focus their attention on the looming threat from Nazi Germany. This little-known conflict had a profound impact on the course of the war, shaping the strategies of both the Axis and the Allies. These bizarre and often overlooked stories from World War II illustrate just how complex, unpredictable, and strange the war truly was. From animal bombs to secret agents, horseback cavalry to female snipers, the war was filled with events that seem almost too strange to be true. But these tales remind us that history is not just about battles and politics. It's also about the people, the decisions, and the extraordinary circumstances that shape the world we live in today. As we continue to uncover more about this global conflict, we gain a deeper understanding of the courage, ingenuity, and sometimes sheer luck that determined the outcome of World War II.